it does spoil the enjoyment for me a little bit, just because it makes me a little bit anxious.
And also, sometimes if the cat's a really shit actor, it really spoils it.
Yeah, don't give them a BAFTA.
This was good cat acting.
Welcome back to Boys on Film, where we cast our critical eyes over the new movie releases and some reissued movie releases and much more as well. I'm your host, Phil Marriott. Joining me is someone with his beady eye on a newly restored release of an 80s horror classic. It's Paul Joseph. Paul, you're like the cat that's got the cream. You see what I did there?
80s horror, love it.
But do you love this one? It's coming out again on the 23rd of May. They're releasing it as a newly restored 4K release on Blu-ray, DVD and digital release as well. Paul, you must have been quite young, obviously younger than me, because you are younger than me, but I think I was about 15 when this came out. 1985 originally when it came out.
I've been 8.
Wow. So you wouldn't have seen it at the time? Or would you?
No. I think the sort of first Stephen King adaptations I was aware of when I was younger was more like maybe Sleepwalkers and some of those kind of Misery, all that kind of stuff.
This came out, this is Cat's Eye, by the way, for those wondering what we're talking about. It came out around the time of a lot of kind of creature-focused horror films like Critters, and of course Gremlins came out. This obviously is an adaptation of a Stephen King. Well, it's a trilogy, isn't it? It's an anthology, not trilogy. 3 stories. 2 of those, I think, were adapted from Stephen King's story, and 1 was written specially for this film. But I think he did the screenplay, Stephen King, for this film.
Yeah.
Directed by Lewis Teague, written by Stephen King, the master of horror, obviously adapted from his own short stories as well. It stars James Woods, Drew Barrymore from E.T., and Kenneth Macmillan, Robert Hayes, Alan King and James Norton. It was classed as a horror film, although we were talking about this before, because you sent me a message saying the tone is really mixed, isn't it? It's almost like a kid's film.
There's sort of like moments of nastiness and maybe some quite dark stuff going on, but then there's some almost slapsticky type, almost a bit more like kids' Disney film type, Escape to Mountain type thing. Yeah.
So story 1, Critters Inc. It's about a New York family man who's played by James Woods. I think he's brilliant. He's got really kind of serious expression on his face. He's quite good to watch. I mean, he's quite entertaining to watch. He's trying to give up cigarettes. He's got obviously the addiction there. A friend advises that he turns to a very shady self-help operation who tries to help him through his addiction, but it's got a dark side.
There's consequences. He strikes a bargain and finds himself in a bit of a pickle.
This follows a cat through each story. The cat is overseeing Drew Barrymore's character to kind of save her from harm. This cat has been put in a cage and is almost like dancing on electric shocks on the ground, because that is the treatment. Obviously this counsellor has warned James Woods' character that could happen to his wife. So if he doesn't give up smoking, his wife is going to be put in the cage and given electric shocks. But whenever animals are used in films, it always puts me on edge. I know that it's done professionally. I know that the cats aren't harmed or the animals aren't harmed, but it does spoil the enjoyment for me a little bit, just because it makes me a little bit anxious. And
also, sometimes if the cat's a really shit actor, it really spoils it.
Don't give them a BAFTA.
This was good cat acting. Interestingly, on this release, as part of the package, there is a kind of featurette with one of the animal wranglers or animal handlers from the film. Which I watched, and it's really good actually, and she talks about that and how the sort of techniques they do to get the cat to act in a certain way, and it's all just about, getting it used to be in response, and it knows if it puts its paw here, it's going to get a treat. And the film sort of starts with an extended sequence of a cat being chased by a really horrible, like rabid looking dog that looks horrific.
It's like Cujo. Is it the same dog in Cujo? Because that came out, obviously that was the same director's film, wasn't it?
I think that's meant to be Cujo. You see also in that open sequence, there's a car that says the number plate says Christine.
That's right,
which is obviously Stephen King. But anyway, there's this long sequence of this cat, and in one of the featurettes, they were talking about how they use depth of field and all this sort of stuff. So it looks like the dog is really close to the cat. And it's not.
Ideally, they wanted to film the cats away from humans, because obviously it must be a tricky thing. I mean, hats off to them for doing it, because like you say, cats, it's a different way of training, isn't it? Because dogs are easier to train, I would imagine, because cats like to do their own thing, don't they?
Cats like to do their own thing, and they're also more likely to almost intentionally do something unpredictable when you don't want them to. Like, cat walking a straight line from over to there, and then suddenly it will just, stop and start rolling around on its back or something.
The feel of it kind of reminded me, a cross of the Twilight Zone and Tales of the Unexpected. I mean, particularly the finale of Story 1, where we see them eating dinner. Not going to spoil it, obviously, if you haven't seen it. I know it's been out a while, this film. That kind of payoff at the end reminded me of something that was in Tales of the Unexpected.
That sort of Tales of the Unexpected, Sting in the Tail, Tales from the Crypt was an 80s thing, wasn't it? And I really like those kind of things. And I think the only thing that we have now that's kind of like similar to that is Inside at Number 9. It's different to short film, because I think a lot of shorts, as in short film now, they're sort of maybe done more from an art perspective, and they don't necessarily have to have that complete wrapped up tale, whereas these things, Tales Unexpected, or these other things were a kind of contained half hour. If you were to break Cat's Eye down into 3 episodes of a Twilight Zone or a Tales of the Unexpected or Tales of the Crypt, you would probably be like, one really good one okay, and one bit naff one. Yeah. So therefore, overall as a film, the quality is maybe not as consistent, and I think part of that is to do with the tone of dark. You start off with a story that's darkly satirical. Kind of reminded me a bit of They Live.
Oh yeah, John Carpenter.
Because that's the one, isn't it, where he puts the glasses on and realises that everyone's that sense of a kind of bigger conspiracy around you, and kind of in a setting that looks quite nice and suburban, and there's actually something really nasty going on under the surface.
See, the second story is my favourite. That's The Ledge. A character called Cresty is played by Kenneth McMillan. He's a mobster casino owner. He seeks revenge on somebody who's having an affair with his wife, and that's Robert Hayes from Airplane. He plays Johnny Norris. And this was my favourite because, again, it kind of was quite comedic, but there was a lot of tension. I mean, I had sweaty palms because I thought it was really cleverly done, actually, because obviously it shows him kind of being forced out onto this window ledge of this massive building, and it's really high up. And of course, when they were filming it, they were quite high up. I mean, some of the shots were filmed, like it shows in the special features, that shows an interview with Robert Hayes, and he was saying some was like just a few feet up, some shots were done up like 30 feet up, and they had lots of cardboard boxes, like just in case he fell off, but he was attached to a wire. I always get that kind of anxious feeling when and maybe it's because I've got a little bit of a fear of heights, and I think anyone who's got a fear of heights will probably feel the same. But I liked that tension, and it did have a slightly comedic edge, not as much as the first story though.
He's basically given this task to do, and then it's increasingly made harder, so it's like the odds are stacked up against him. He's almost forced to walk round quite a narrow ledge on a high building to another thing, but then a bit like a sort of cartoon Roadrunner type thing, the guy keeps popping out a window and like hosing him down with water, or kind of making it more difficult for him. But yeah, it was very tense.
So Robert Hayes had a cracked rib when he was filming this, so some of the scenes I think were really painful, genuinely painful, when he was acting out these scenes. The film cost $7 million to make, and it made $13 million at the box office, so it was a big hit. I mean, they obviously made money on it. I remembered the film, but I don't remember it fondly as in, it's one of my favourite horror films of the 80s, because I don't think it is. The music in it as well, it's really strange. It's Alan Silvestri is the guy that did a lot of soundtracks to the big blockbusters action films from the 80s. It's got this really kind of... It's like, it is kind of slapstick, and it's funny. I was watching it with my other half, Jeremy. He's never seen it, and he was expecting it to be a lot more horrifying, but it's not really, is it?
No. I mean, Drew Barrymore in E.T. is one of the most adorable things ever. It's like, she's so good, whereas in this she's a little bit older, and I think the cuteness factor is on a little bit. But yeah, it's the idea about a girl who seems to have nightmares about stuff happening, and like a sort of like boogeyman in her bedroom type thing, or a monster under the bed. Parents don't believe her, and then the cat arrives and to sort of almost play a role in saving her or protecting her. But of course, the parents start thinking it's the cat that's doing all the bad stuff. I mean, that's very much like a kids film, that section.
The effects are quite jarring, I thought, in this story. The little goblin is really, really tiny 1 minute, and then really, really big the next. I know that they did actually film the scenes of the bedroom with really massive furniture just because I think it was played by someone who was like, the Goblin was played by someone that was 4 foot tall. So they were trying to scale everything, and yeah, they did quite a good job. But there were certain scenes where he looked really small and looked really big. It's like the sizing was a bit of an issue.
There's also it's mentioned that there's a monster that comes and tries to sort of steal your breath while you're sleeping.
Oh yeah, because that's the myth, isn't it, of cats? That cats do that.
Right. Yes. And that's it. I think the mum says that's what cats will do or something.
So the cat is getting the blame.
Yeah, and they have these scenes where this little oddly sized goblin that's come out of the wall, and it's like Drew Barrymore's asleep and it comes right up to her face and is like, and that's quite sinister. There's a bit of a sort of like grim tales, dark Rumpelstiltskin-y type, that kind of a bit more like fairy tale nastiness going on.
Yeah, and a bit Krampus. That horror film from Christmas.
But then it does end up just in a bit of a very protracted fight scene between a cat and an animatronic goblin. See,
my guess is that they spent all the money from the budget on the actors, because of course Drew Barrymore was a big actor at that time, because obviously she'd just done E.T. So I'm imagining that $7 million, perhaps she got a lot of that. Maybe they didn't spend so much on animatronics. I'm not dissing the animatronics team, but yeah, I suppose they did also, what they could.
From what they said in the special features, they also spent a lot of money on cat treats to kind of get the cat.
Yes.
And so there'd be a bit like where the cat's pouring at a wall and they've put peanut butter on the other side of it or something, or kind of, and it's like...
And didn't they have $1 million less than what they budgeted for as well? So they had to readjust certain things.
God, that's not what you want in the middle of a film shoot, isn't it?
And that's a lot of money, actually, when it comes to, production, I suppose.
Especially in those days.
So, the boys on film verdict then, Paul. Were you a scaredy cat revisiting this 80s classic, or did it make you feel like a cat on Hot Tin Roof?
Ooh. I don't know. I don't know what other cat analogies I could have. Yeah, I'd say, it was diverting, and I kind of think there's lots to enjoy from it, just from, it's a decent 80s horror aesthetic, and it's well executed and stuff. But I think if you like something a bit more dark and disturbing out of your horror, you're probably not going to get it from this particular.
Absolutely, and I think that's why it doesn't really stick out in my mind as one of my favourite horror films from the 80s, because at that time, 85, I was watching hardcore horror. I mean, I was only 15, but I was watching like The Evil Dead and Halloween.
Well, the slasher films were massive, weren't they? And all that sort of stuff.
But saying that, I did enjoy revisiting this. I found it a fun horror film to watch. It wasn't gory, it wasn't violent.
No.
But by today's standards, I quite like that. There's something quite enjoyable about dipping into something that isn't necessarily offensive. Yeah.
In horror, you can often end up with quite a mindless body count of disposable characters, death and carnage, really. And this doesn't necessarily have it. It more has a sort of sting in the tail and maybe certain just desserts for certain antagonists or whatever, but it's not like there's just
there we go. You said sting in the tail.
Sting in the tail. Oh. I bet you there's an 80s horror film about killer scorpions.
There will be, like alligators.
I could just see the video box now in the video store, that kind of the design, that brilliant design of 80s horror videos. We could maybe do a whole thing about animal horror. There's a really interesting one, I don't know if you've ever seen it, called Phase 4, I think, that's about ants that take over the world, but rather than it being like giant B-movie ants like in a 60s film that would be terrorising Joan Collins or something, they're just ants who are normal ant size, but they just seem to suddenly get some awareness to work together, and they just start like basically overtaking systems and gnawing through electricity things, and basically the whole, it's almost like this apocalypse happens just because of an ant plague. So
what's your star rating? I'm going to give it 3 because I enjoyed it. It's not my favourite horror film ever, but it had a certain quirky charm to it.
I think it's good entertainment. 3 for me as well.
What is your favourite Stephen King film adaptation? Mine is Carrie. I mentioned that earlier.
Yeah, I would say Carrie, but there's also quite a lot of stuff that's almost easy to forget about him because it's not so firmly in the horror genre. So the Shawshank Redemption.
Oh yeah, of course.
Which is incredible. Stand By Me, that was
Yeah.
him. And obviously Misery is very good. And then another one, probably is more similar tone to Misery, was Dolores Claiborne. That came
I
out
love
in
that
the
film.
mid-90s. Stephen King wrote The Shining, didn't he? Or have I
He
just
did,
made
yeah.
that? There's so many almost different genres within genres of whatever, and Carrie's really interesting as well because obviously it's a brilliant horror and it's mesmerizing and shocking, but actually at the core of it is quite a really sad story about bullying and abuse at home, and it's almost like the horror is how that character releases what's going on for them. So
absolutely, and the fear also of her mother, because her mother is this religious nut.
That's what I meant by saying about the sort of abuse at home, really, is that
Yeah.
so it's kind of like he's very interesting, Stephen King, I think, in that there's so much going on in those things. But yeah, I think probably Carrie of his would probably be my favourite as well.
Cat's Eye is available on Ultra HD, Blu-ray, DVD and digital viewing as well.
It does look great, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. They've really polished it up, haven't they? I think
Quality.
they've spent over 150 hours on, remastering it.
I'm going to say this can sound really mean now. My sister is incredibly kind, lovely person, and she loves animals or whatever. She always gets sad if she watches old films that've got animals in them because she knows that they'll be dead by now. So if she was to watch this, she'd be like, "That cat's dead." I mean, unless
humans
unless
as well.
the cat has lived to be 40 years old or whatever. Drew Barrymore's still going. I was in America the other week and was watching. They have the Drew Barrymore show in the morning.
Chat show, yeah.
We get This Morning, or Loose Women. They get Drew Barrymore. It's great.
So, yeah, let's talk about movies. Join us to chat on Twitter. We are there. And Facebook and Instagram, it's Boys on Film LDN. And on Twitter, it's LDN Boys. Where can we find you, Paul, on social media?
Pop Horror UK or Athena 80s. Just that, I think. Or Paul B. Joseph 1.
You had to think about that because you've got loads of hands in pies, haven't you? You're doing everything.
Yeah, and it's like, which brand am I representing today?
It's good to see you. Always great, great chat when we talk about movies. Yeah. And I'm looking forward to the next one. We've got lots to get our teeth into. Lots of horrors coming up. And I should say also Shudder. We've had a lot of screeners for Shudder. There's some amazing stuff happening over on Shudder. We've got the Cursed Films series, which I've just finished watching, the second series of that. So we're going to review that soon. You've still not seen that, Paul. You need to see it.
No, I've got a pile of things to get through.
Thank you everybody for watching, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye for now. Don't forget to subscribe and like.